Welcome to Thelma Podcast Life Story Channel. This is part 2 of a 3-part interview with John Robertson about his memories of the live music scene in Edinburgh 1960s to the present day. This time around it's about the delights and perils of being on stage and travelling to gigs. We hear about when it all goes well, but also having to play into the early hours of the morning and fights breaking out in the audience, travelling back home in the van late at night while the driver and passengers share a bottle of whiskey. We learn more about the venues, the Gamp, the Top Storey and the Gonk, and going to see the emerging bands of the time like the Mersey Beats and Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. We hope you enjoy. When you were live on stage, you'd say, you mentioned that you were standing in the middle.
Yes.
Would there always be you'd always be in a certain place on stage?
Yes, we found the drummer would sit behind me and my guitarist on my left and the keyboard player on the right. Pete, my keyboard player, used to try to dissuade me from speaking to the crowd. He says, but because you tend to shout at them, which is probably the case. And sometimes you'd get people coming up to speak to you. And I don't know if I was, let's say, the most diplomatic. I remember, I played up at Gleneagles, and it was a wedding reception. We were booked to play from 8 till 12, but the reception went on, instead of us getting on, you never would start it. You would maybe start at 9, you'd get a break in the middle and then play till 12. We were told at 20 past 11 we could set up. 20 past 11. My drummer was asleep on the stairs and all that sort of stuff, so we're bored sitting around. So we set up as quickly as we could. We were ready about 11:45 or 10 to 12, and there's only 12 minutes left to play. So we played till 12, and we said, well, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, because we didn't get to play earlier because you weren't ready for us. We have to go. And there was a bit of an argument ensued. They wanted us to play another hour for nothing. And we said, well, we've been sitting around it. So I can't remember how that was resolved. But that's the kind of thing that could happen. That if the speeches went on for so long, essentially we had to, I think we played on without anything extra for an extra 10 or 15 minutes. But we were quite tight. You sit round bored, you can't go anywhere. Not that you could go anywhere, but because the speeches could end at any minute, and then they say, right, on you go. And it took us nearly half an hour to get the stuff in, wired up, set up, ready. That's just how long it took, and we weren't hanging around. And I was not, of course, pleased because I was wanting to be playing. Yeah. And you were just sitting around bored.
Which is interesting because that's the far side of glamour rock and roll, isn't it? Just standing around.
Yes. Well, we played in the bandstand. What's it called in Princess Street? The Ross Bandstand. We did that 2 summers. We played 15 minutes, and then there was another band down for 15. Then you did 3 sets of 15 minutes interspersed with the other. But that was 1985 and 1986.
Oh, right.
I'll tell you one. In 1986, I think we did only the one. 1985. Well, I can remember because my 40th birthday was announced on stage, much to my annoyance. 1986, I said, well, to my keyboard player, Pete, look, we're only doing the one. Let's be different from the other bands that play, because they did it every day. And they were all just dressed in jeans and T-shirts and stuff. And I said, let's go on in our fan. Let's do the dinner suits.
Ooh.
So we did. And my wife very seldom ever came to hear us, but she looked down from Princess Street and she heard some of the people watched it say, well, look at that band, they're all in their dinner suits. It was just something different. It didn't change the playing or anything, but it looked... See, in the old days when you played, when I played with Cam Robbie or Jim Bakey, it was dinner suits. Well, I had a black jacket, black trousers, white shirt and a bow tie, so... but it wasn't a suit, and that's how you were... you could take your jacket off eventually or your tie off, but you had to start the night all looking the same. And that was it.
So very formal.
Yes, but that was it. That was the tail end of the old days before the rock bands came along. They would be around 30s, 40s, 50s, into the 60s. So I was in. I did some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, we were playing with 10-piece bands in the assembly rooms in George Street. Yeah, 10-piece. They had a drummer and they had a conga drummer as well, trumpet, saxophone. trombone, keyboard player. It was quite something quite good fun to do. And these guys were all a few years older.
Of course,
these were the sort of swing kind of jazz bands. So that was a nice education. Play with these guys, and then to go and do the rock stuff, if you like.
I mean, these guys must have been quite... It wouldn't have been their sort of thing, rock and roll.
No. I can remember playing with Jim Bakey, who was what a laugh. Unlike Jim Bakey. It was a gig we did at Stirling. I mean, actually, I think Jim's dead now, so it won't matter. No. There's nothing against him. We finished the gig. Now, these guys were all big drinkers. Seriously. And I am not even now any kind of big drinker. We finished the gig in Stirling. We had to drive back. I got dropped at the south of Edinburgh about 5:30 in the morning, carrying my guitar, and that was it. And I lived the opposite side of Edinburgh. But on the van coming back from Stirling to the south of Edinburgh, the driver and the two others, as far as I know, finished a 40-ounce bottle of whiskey between them as they were driving. I was sitting in the back thinking, this is maybe a bit dangerous, and they were all singing and laughing in the front. But I can remember the driver, as he's driving, lifting the bottle up. I mean, you'd get the jail for that nowadays if you got caught. And nothing happened. I mean, they obviously got away with it. But I can remember waiting on a bus and getting on a night bus there was a load of cleaner ladies were there, and me sitting with my guitar. I didn't get home till about 7 o'clock in the morning. Oh dear, what you would do. I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't have a car then. No. So they took me to the gig and then said, well, we'll drop you off. But Edinburgh is about 7 miles across. I couldn't walk it. So I walked until a night bus came along and eventually made it home. I did play at Gilmerton in some, the blind guy Morris, I remember playing out there with him, but it'd be some kind of, it was miners' clubs in those days.
Still out there in the miners.
So there was Pennycook Miners, Shortston Miners with Morris, keyboard player. As I say, he was so funny. When a blind guy speaks, this may not translate, but when Morris would speak to you, he didn't turn towards you.
Right.
We're looking at each other just now because he didn't want people to think he was blind. He didn't wear the black specs or anything like. Although I've got another story here, but anyway. And as we were sitting at the break in Shorts and Miners, I had told him, I said, look, when you speak to somebody, turn towards them. If you speak looking away from them. So what he did was he would do that, and then he would turn very suddenly and stare straight at them, and then when somebody else spoke he would turn. And I said, no, somewhere between that and not looking at all. No, the other funny story, I was taken up to a booking. I picked him up, and he lived in Bonnyrigg. I picked him up. He turned round to me in the passenger side and said, look, and he had on black specs. But he hadn't taken the price tag off them, and I hadn't. So I'm driving along laughing, and he said, what are you laughing at? I said, there's a price tag. Well, of course he didn't see it was there, so it was still stuck to the front of the glasses.
Shame. So when was that? When were you working?
Morris, 1974 till 83 or something like that. We played a long time together. In fact, Morris was good because he was a creative player. He'd be playing something and I'm playing bass, and he would suddenly either change his vocal to my harmony and I had to swap onto his. He had a higher voice than I had. Play something on the keyboard and expect me to come back with something like that. And it was definitely an education playing with him. He was a piano tuner to trade. And it was interesting, he told me he would tune for some big names in the Usher Hall. He was the piano tuner. And he had a superb ear, Morris. He could hear, he'd tell me how you would tune. You'd listen for the beats till the beats slow. If you're tuning one note against a tuning fork, you were, I think in those days a tuning fork, hit the tuning fork, play the piano, and you would hear beats if you were, and he would explain, and when the beats slowed down, that meant you were getting closer in tune. And he told me of some big name, whose name I can't remember, who said he would like the right hand of the piano, the treble keys tuned ever so slightly up and the left hand tuned ever so slightly down. And he said even when he was performing, he said I could hear him playing in such a way that was telling me he liked what he was doing. A big professional, I don't know about world renowned, quite possibly, and this was a classical pianist. And so Morris used to speak to them and get the piano tuned in such a way, things that you remember.
So what sort of stuff would you play with him?
Oh, it was just whatever was sort of popular at the time. I mean, one of the favourite songs is, even now, is Sweet Caroline. Everybody, Sweet Caroline, whoa, ho, ho. It's not even on the record, but that's what people sing. There's an instrumental bit in the record which hasn't got words, but even doing it now, you'll hear people sing. And then you hear them at football matches if they're singing it. Any place, Sweet Caroline, yo, ho, ho. It's embarrassing. I hate it. But country and western, what I call country crap, I don't like. No. Buddy Rich, one of the funniest but best drummers of all time, my favourite story of his is he was in hospital and was asked medically, he says, are you allergic to anything? And he said, oh yes, what's that? Country and western. Buddy Rich, wonderful, well worth looking up on YouTube.
Yes,
and a comedian, and also a good singer, and also a good dancer. The man was just, what a talent. Well Brilliant. Worth looking up.
Did you ever have gigs then, if you talked about ones that are quite memorable, ones that you think, oh God, I wish this would stop? Or...
Well, yes, I'm trying to think of there was a night in Leith Street, not Fairley's, there was another...
Top Storey, was it?
Well, no, there's another, over the road and further down, the something hotel.
Oh, right.
Anyway, we were in there and I don't know if you would say the Fleet was in. Did you know what that means? So there were a number of... Now, I can remember standing in front of the microphone singing, and at least one was a sailor, and a huge fight going on, maybe a metre in front of me, and I felt like I had to keep going, and I was ready to step back because if you've got a microphone and it suddenly gets hit, you could take your teeth out. Never did happen to me, but I've heard of stories like that where I might get slammed into your face. So I wanted to be out of there as quickly as possible. I mean, it wasn't just these two fighting. There was a big battle, but the two guys were maybe 3 feet in front of me, punching the living daylights out of each other. And I thought, no, this better not to be
here. Not working, that.
But we felt we had to keep going.
The show must go on.
Well,
literally.
Kind of. But that was a time when I thought, no, that's maybe not this is not the best place to be at this time. There will have been others. I'd probably come back to me later on. Times when you thought, this isn't going terribly well, or something like that. And no matter what you did, you could play essentially the same music one night as the next night. First night, no reaction. Next night, goes a storm. Why would that be? No idea. No. Or the other way around. You would have a great night, play more or less the same thing to what you thought was the same crowd.
So you've literally never got nervous since that first...
You get confident.
Yeah.
No, I would say there was the first time, and there would be a few other times after that. But slowly you would build up in confidence, and you felt okay. There was one night when I wasn't actually playing, but in the Gamp club. Does that name mean anything? Yeah. The Gamp. Went to see Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, who were a good rock band, but it was the company I had. There was Lord O'Neill, Martin O'Neill, and Mike Hearn of the Incredible String Band, and myself. We three of us went to see Johnny. This was before any of them. This was before Martin O'Neill had become an MP, and it was before the Incredible String Band even existed. But Mike Hearn used to play with the Saracens for a short while. So we were quite friendly, and I think it would probably be myself who said to them, anyone in the band interested in going to see Johnny Kidd and the Pirates? So we went along as a three, and we're very good. Yeah. From what, at least by the standards of that day, they were very good. Yeah. Shaking All Over and Hungry for Love, Johnny Kidd. He had a few hits, and then the year or so after he got killed in a car crash, 1965. But they all had pirates outfits on, and Johnny Kidd had a patch over his eye. And I remember that he had a sword which he sort of threw into the stage, and it shook around as he did, shaking all over. That's still a rock classic.
Yeah, no,
Shaking All Over.
Yeah, no, it's a great song.
And they were a good band of their type. Yeah. But they used to appear in pantomimes and stuff like that. I mean, there wasn't an awful lot else. They didn't have the facilities to do the big outdoor gigs or whatever. At least I don't think they did anyway. But there was a revolution. I mean, when the Beatles played the Shea Stadium, as far as I can make out, they had their standard gig gear behind them, and I don't know how many thousand, but you wouldn't have heard them.
No, that's what they always said. They hated it, didn't they? Because you couldn't hear yourself.
They could hear themselves, but with the screaming and the noise, that would be louder than the band. I mean, nowadays it's all cheap. Excellent.
So you've obviously, in the past, and met quite a few quite well-known people.
Well, yes, I did a few. I'm trying to apart. I mean, not really any more than I mentioned just now. The Bachelors, Billy J. Kramer. There were others, but it's so long ago. It's 55 years ago, really.
Of course it is, yeah.
Since then, I don't think. I mean, I'll probably come out here and think, why did I not mention?
Well, that's why I suggest you come back. You see, make a note of anything and then retread.
That would be nice.
Good. Yeah, it was something I was going to ask. Backstage, yes, it always quite intrigues me. Backstage, and I know not everywhere has a backstage.
I was just going to say that there isn't a backstage.
Yeah.
You come off the stand and go either to the bar or outside for a cigarette or something like that.
Were you a smoker?
I was, and I'm now.
Vaping, right, yeah.
Not that it's relevant, but it's 8 years ago, I was in hospital for a sort of small eye operation. And one of the old nurses said to me, I see you went out for a cigarette. And I said, yes. She said, have you ever tried these? And I said, no. She said, try it. And I said, I can't try it here now. She says, yes, you can. So I tried it. Whoa, that was it. I used to smoke roll-ups because they were cheaper. And the next day, when I was out, I went and got one of these, and that was my last cigarette. That's nothing to do with playing.
No.
And up until then, I always had a slightly rough little cough.
Right.
But that's not there now. So I don't know. I think the jury's out in it.
In the 60s, it's very much people think of, rock and roll, sex, drugs and rock and roll. There must have been, I'm not suggesting but there must have been that going on behind the scenes, I would imagine, with some bands.
I suppose I can't say that I have any particular recollection of that. I was just so dedicated to the playing. I've never been a drinker.
No.
In fact, I can remember when we in my Allegretto band anyway, the guys would always go for a pint or two before we started, but I was always such a skinflint, I'd take along a tin of lemonade or Coke or something like that, and I would drink it through the night. And eventually the band did that, because I said, look, you get a couple of pints before you go on. You get a pint at the in the middle, and maybe a pint. And how much is that going to cost you off your gig money? Plus, people think they play better when they've had a drink or two, and that's complete opposite. So eventually we all got round to just drinking colas or lemonade or something. And nobody... I mean, the other thing is that the people who were putting the dance on, they didn't like to see people drinking alcohol when they were playing. But you couldn't argue with it. I mean, if you'd wanted, you could have drunk a little bit out and poured some alcohol or into your drink, but we just didn't do that.
I know. I mean, they wouldn't. The ones that remain wouldn't mind me saying, but I know the Embers very much existed on
booze. Yes, I suppose. I was going to say here, though, I did smoke in those days, and I can remember seeing somebody at the end on the what's called the nut, not the nut, the headstock of your guitar. The strings could, if you didn't trim them off. Yeah. But the good thing was, if it was a tipped cigarette, you could press it into one of the thin strings, and it would wave around, because you could smoke whilst you were playing. You're smoking everywhere, so you could push it down the string, and that would hold it into the tip. But of course, as soon as you moved, the weight of the cigarette would wave about. I can remember seeing, and I'm sure I would. Well, no, I couldn't do that because I was playing bass in those days. But I can remember my guitarist would or seeing other bands doing this. Bass, thicker strings. They were too thick but a thin top string and a guitar, you could do that.
It's bizarre because you forget that the places were.
Oh, everybody could smoke everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely changed round. I played in a lot of smoky places. The Gonk club, that just come back to me. Right. That was up Toll Cross. There's a wide road at Toll Cross now. Yeah. Well, there was a whole block taken out to make that wide road, and in there, and that was a dreadful little place, smelly, but it was called the Gonk.
I've not come across that. Gamp, but not the Gonk.
Gamp and the Gonk, as I say, that doesn't exist now because they say they took a block.
Right.
It was just like one biggish, well, no, not even biggish room, and I think it had damp in the walls it's smelly and.
And did you play the top deck, top
story? Yes. Story. Now who was it? Was in the Mersey Beats? Yep. And spoke to them, and I remember the guitarist when we were there with them, he broke a string, so he had to stop to put the string on, and whilst they did that, they did Peggy Lee's song Fever. That's just bass and drums, which was their go-to song when the guitarist broke a string. I know there will be other names.
Thank you for listening to our Life Story podcast. Please check out our other podcasts, Leith Lives, The Thelma Tapes, Analog Rory's Jukebox, and Forgotten Songs from the Broom Cupboard. All these can be found on popular podcast platforms such as Apple Podcast, Spotify and Deezer. Also via our website www.livingmemory.org.uk, or we have 2 Facebook pages, one for the Living Memory Association and the other for Thelma Podcasts. If you have a story or a memory you'd like recorded, please contact us via our website. Once again, thanks.